On December 27, 2017, concerned neighbors alerted emergency services after hearing unusual cries and noises coming from Tonie Wells's first-floor apartment. The neighbors reported distressing sounds of a young child crying, raising fears that something had gone terribly wrong. When officers finally arrived and entered the Crown Heights apartment, they were confronted with a harrowing scene. At the bottom of the basement staircase lay a young mother, unresponsive, with injuries unmistakably indicating a brutal assault. Her young daughter, unharmed but alone, was found nearby, close to her mother's lifeless body. This is the tragic story of Tonie Wells, a 22-year-old woman filled with dreams, hopes, and deep love for her young daughter. But her life was cruelly cut short, leaving behind not only unanswered questions, but also a haunting sense of betrayal from those closest to her. Speaking of betrayal, this video is sponsored by Aura, a service that safeguards you and your loved ones from those who want to betray you online. Ever get one of those strange text messages from USPS saying they have a package for you? Click this link to confirm. USPS never sends those types of messages. That's spam from someone who has targeted you. They likely got your information from a data broker or a data leak on the dark web. Do you know how much of your personal information is hanging out online for people who want to target you like this? I'm talking about your full name, phone number, home address, email address, information about your relatives, and more. And data brokers, which are companies that are in the business of making money from your personal details, are selling your information to scammers, just like the scammers who sent that USPS text message to you. I've gotten those messages too. That's why I turned to Aura. I've been using Aura to protect myself from identity theft online. These days, it's no longer a question of whether your information gets into the wrong hands. It's a matter of when, and when it does, it can turn your life upside down. When both my mom and husband had their identities stolen, it was a wake-up call for me. When I did a little digging on my own information, I was shocked at how much detail was out there. It was alarming. Aura reaches out to the data brokers that have my information, and it actively takes steps to have it removed by automatically sending opt-out requests to them on my behalf. Aura uncovered more than 18 data brokers that were actively selling my personal information and alerted me that one of my email addresses was found on the dark web. Cleaning up my information not only helps to reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers, like the ones sending that sneaky USPS text message, who could use this information to access my accounts and sensitive information. But that's not all. With Aura, I also enjoy a suite of features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. It's a breeze to set up, and the cherry on top, I get all these perks bundled together at one price that doesn't break the bank. Aura brings it all together in one solution. If you sign up through my link right now at aura.com/sleuthylucy, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial. For a more direct route, you can simply click the link in the description below. December 27, 2017. Just after 8 a.m. on a cold winter Wednesday in Brooklyn, Tonie made a desperate call to the police, expressing intense fear for her life. Neighbors, too, were alarmed by the escalating sounds coming from her apartment. Muffled but heated voices, mixed with the cries of a toddler echoing through the walls, heightened their concern, prompting them to reach out to the authorities. One neighbor reported hearing Tonie shout, "He's going to kill me!" Moments later, a loud, jarring thud reverberated through the building, as if something, or someone, had fallen down the stairs. Despite the urgency, the response to Tonie's Sterling Place brownstone was delayed. When New York police officers finally arrived shortly before 10 a.m., they found that Tonie's young daughter had been locked outside the apartment, alone and crying for her mother, though unharmed. Inside, however, officers encountered a heartbreaking scene. Tonie's lifeless body lay at the bottom of the basement staircase.
While responding to a 911 call just before 10 o'clock this morning, the NYPD says they found 22-year-old Tonie Wells unresponsive and unconscious at the bottom of the staircase in the basement of her Crown Heights apartment.
An initial determination deemed this female's death to be suspicious, and it is currently being investigated. The deceased female has bruising on her neck, and it appears as if she was either pushed or fell down the flight of stairs leading to the basement.
Tonie Wells, born Tonie Nicole Lopez on August 4, 1995, was a beautiful 22-year-old mother from Connecticut, but raised in Harlem, New York. She spent her childhood surrounded by a close-knit family who often gathered for joyful celebrations, especially around the holidays. Known for her radiant smile, striking hazel eyes that held a hint of sadness, and an infectious love of life, Tonie had a laugh that could light up any room. Raised alongside 3 siblings by her single mother, Ellie, Tonie was a blend of feisty spirit and fierce loyalty. Ellie fondly recalls Tonie's stubborn streak. Even as a young girl, she had a bold personality and wasn't afraid to test boundaries, sometimes skipping school or bending the rules in search of her own path.
Rebellious, and she became a teenager, 15, angry, didn't want to go to high school. I found out she had a little boyfriend, Michael Riley, who she was deeply in love with. So this is when, like I said, the hard beginning starts with Tonie. Like, she wasn't listening to me, the cutting of the class, and I'm like, Tone, she would never listen. One time, I'm going to work, and I told her, I said, whatever you do, I don't better not see you on no third bike. She was like, Mom, I swear to God, I would never do that. I'm like, Tone, I'm going to work. I go up the block to Madison. By the time I get to Madison Avenue, my baby's flying down Fifth Avenue on a dirt bike. I said, that's not my baby. My girlfriend called me and said, Ellie, your daughter's down Fifth Avenue on a dirt bike behind her boyfriend, Michael. So I'm like, I'll wait till she gets home. Another event was, she was always thinking she's grown. And I'm like, Tonie, this is one neighborhood. You can't be walking by yourself. Tonie was hard-headed. She didn't care.
From her teenage years, Tonie was naturally drawn to young men with ambition and purpose. She had a soft spot for bold, charismatic types, what her mother called a weakness for bad boys. But her attraction went deeper than looks. Tonie admired men who were driven, who worked hard and pursued their goals. To her, a man's commitment to building his future was just as appealing as his charm and confidence. Initially, Tonie's family assumed her attraction to bold, daring men was just a passing phase, but over time, they noticed a pattern. Tonie would invest deeply in these relationships, often overlooking red flags and dismissing her family's concerns. They watched her get swept up in excitement and passion, but they also witnessed the emotional roller coasters that frequently followed, painful to watch from the sidelines. Then Tonie met Barry Wells, and things seemed to take a different turn, a turn for the better. To Tonie, he was her Prince Charming. Barry was just the type of guy Tonie usually fell for, charming, ambitious, and full of life. Her family noticed his strong drive and confidence right away. He seemed to go after what he wanted, making Tonie fall for him even harder. Barry and Tonie looked like a perfect match for her family, full of shared dreams and mutual support. And time only strengthened this notion. As the family spent more time with Barry, they noticed his independence and clear plans for the future. He supported Tonie's aspirations and encouraged her to follow her dreams. Everything seemed ideal, and the family thought that Tonie might have found the one in Barry, someone who mirrored her passion for life and her many ambitions. Barry seemed different from the others in a good way, and it was easy for everyone to see why Tonie was drawn to him. As a young single mother, Tonie's dreams were vibrant and centered around family. She envisioned a future where she could build a stable, joyful life for herself and her baby girl, who was only about 3 months old at the time. Her hopes were focused on creating a warm, loving home where her daughter could thrive and her own romantic relationship could blossom. April 2016 marks the time frame when Tonie met up with Barry for the first time at a local cafe they both frequented. She was immediately drawn to his charm and the way he carried himself with a blend of confidence and humility. Their conversation flowed effortlessly. What began as a casual meeting quickly deepened into a genuine connection. The connection was practically instant, and the two quickly hit it off. Barry Wells was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, where he faced a difficult upbringing marked by financial struggles and the challenges of a rough neighborhood. Despite these hardships, Barry showed a strong determination to rise above his circumstances. Known for his love of fitness and tattoos, He took pride in his physical appearance, channeling his energy into the gym. To support himself, he worked multiple jobs, each one a step toward building the stability he longed for. Through persistence, he earned a degree, secured his own place, a car, and created a life he could be proud of. Beneath his tough exterior was a commitment to personal growth and responsibility, qualities that truly set him apart. Barry is tall and slender in stature, and well-educated, having graduated from the University at Buffalo around 2010, qualities that made him quite a catch. Although he was about 7 years older than Tonie, he embodied everything she envisioned in a partner. While some young men might shy away from the responsibility of dating a new mother, Barry readily embraced Tonie's daughter and brought his own child into their blended family. His charisma and her vibrant energy created a dynamic that drew others in and built a solid foundation for their relationship. Things moved fast with the couple. After nearly a year together, Tonie and Barry announced their plans to spend their lives together. On March 29, 2017, Tonie shared a Facebook post revealing Barry's surprise proposal, along with her heartfelt promise to keep their vows until the end.
What? What?
Really?
What? There's no chicken wings in that bag? Yo, what's that in the bag? Yo, what's in your bag, yo? There's no chicken wings in there? Chicken wings and fries, we don't go on dates.
This sweet, playful moment was a hit with their online followers, quickly gathering hundreds of likes and comments. Then, just 12 days later, and to the surprise of her entire family, Tonie posted another unexpected photo, this time of their wedding cake, adorned with a date that had only recently passed, April 10, 2017. This unexpected post revealed that she and Barry had already exchanged vows, marking the beginning of their commitment to one another. Barry and Tonie quickly gained popularity online, attracting attention as a couple. 5 months into their marriage, Barry surprised Tonie with a giant tattoo of her portrait on his back as an early anniversary gesture. He shared a photo of the tattoo on Instagram, which quickly went viral and earned them the hashtag #RelationshipGoals. Yet, despite their apparent bliss and her hopes for a bright future, only 3 months after that heartfelt gesture, Tonie's life took a devastating turn. December 27, 2017. Approximately 9 a.m. The holiday season is often a time of joy, warmth, and togetherness, a time to celebrate Christmas and welcome the new year with hope. Just days earlier, Tonie and her family had gathered to enjoy this festive spirit, creating memories they thought would carry them into a bright new chapter. But all of that would soon be overshadowed by an emergency that would forever alter their lives, shattering their holiday happiness in an instant. It was on that relatively quiet winter Wednesday morning in Brooklyn, New York, just 4 days after Tonie's family had gathered to celebrate Christmas, when the family's holiday joy came to an abrupt end. Gripped by overwhelming fear for her life, Tonie urgently called 911, pleading for help at her apartment. Shortly after, officers Lau and Jaber were dispatched to her brownstone apartment. However, upon arrival, they remained in their vehicle rather than entering the apartment to check on the young mother, allowing precious, potentially life-saving minutes to slip by on that bitterly cold, 33-degree winter day. As time ticked away, more 911 calls poured in from concerned neighbors, reporting loud arguing and the cries of Tonie's 21-month-old daughter. After the sounds of what neighbors believed to be an argument finally quieted down, one concerned neighbor decided to check on Tonie and her baby. Arriving at the apartment, she found Tonie's toddler locked outside, crying, and immediately took the child to safety. She then called for her husband to look inside the apartment. When he did, he was stunned to discover Tonie lying unconscious at the bottom of the basement staircase. Finally, around 9:50 a.m., New York police returned to Tonie's apartment, this time stepping inside to check things out. To their dismay, they discovered the horrifying scene. The severity of Tonie's injuries and the position of her body led investigators to suspect immediately that she had been violently pushed to her death. Moments later, Tonie was officially pronounced dead at the scene, and the investigation officially began. Detectives immediately secured the scene, then meticulously documented and collected evidence for analysis. Meanwhile, the night before, Tonie's mother, Ellie, was gripped by an unshakable sense of dread. The instinctive premonition that only a mother feels when something is wrong with her child. She couldn't sleep, kept awake by a gnawing feeling that something was wrong. When she woke up at 8:15 the morning of December 27th, that nagging feeling lingered, gnawing at her with quiet persistence. She got out of bed, made her coffee, and waited for Tonie's arrival. Ellie was expecting Tonie to drop off her young daughter so she could watch her for the day. But when Tonie didn't show, Ellie's worry grew. She called her sister, Catherine, to see if she knew where Tonie might be, as Tonie had been staying with Catherine and her cousin Kat since their Christmas celebration on the 23rd. Catherine reassured Ellie, explaining that Tonie had gone to Queens to check out a new place to stay temporarily and was likely just lost, as she wasn't very familiar with the area. As Ellie hung up, her worry only deepened. Then, suddenly, she received a direct message on her social media profile from an unknown woman's account asking her to call. As she thought about it, she recognized the woman as someone who knew Barry and Tonie. Confused and anxious, Ellie dialed the number, and oddly, a man answered. His voice resonated as somewhat cold as he said to Ellie, "Your daughter's done." Ellie was stunned, struggling to comprehend his words. At first, she thought he meant Tonie might be in trouble, perhaps that she'd done something to Barry. But then the man clarified, and the truth was far worse. The stranger, who turned out to be Barry's best friend and tenant upstairs, delivered a blow that would change her life forever. "Tonie is dead. I found your daughter at the bottom of the basement stairs in her apartment. She's dead." In shock and disbelief, Ellie felt her world collapse. She and Tonie's sister immediately set out for Brooklyn, the trip filled with an agonizing sense of urgency. When she arrived, the reality was more painful than she could have imagined. Yellow police tape surrounded the apartment, a haunting barrier between her and the daughter she'd lost. Bright lights from every local news channel flooded the scene, capturing the tragedy. Heartbroken and overwhelmed, Ellie tried to hide her face from the cameras, her grief too raw to be shared with the world. Each glance at the crime scene, each flash of the cameras, drove home the unimaginable loss she had suffered. Shortly after securing the scene, officers began canvassing the neighborhood, interviewing Tonie's neighbors to gather insights into her life and relationships. They asked about the nature of Tonie and Barry's relationship, seeking any details that could shed light on recent events. Given the circumstances, detectives knew that when homicide is suspected, the spouse often becomes the first person of interest. Barry, as Tonie's husband, would be no exception. Their questions gradually began to focus on his behavior, habits, and any tensions between them that might explain what had happened that day. Many of the neighbors reported that Tonie and Barry appeared to be a close-knit and loving couple. Many saw them going about everyday activities together, like walking around the neighborhood, which gave the impression of a stable and affectionate relationship. Some neighbors described them as a normal young family, noting that they always seemed friendly and courteous to those around them. One neighbor, Ms. Miller, told news outlets that she was about to walk her dog when she heard the news. She mentioned that she hadn't noticed any issues between the newlyweds. They seemed like a pleasant family, she recalled. I would see them doing the laundry together. To most of the neighbors, there were no overt signs of any trouble between them. From these initial interviews, detectives found no direct evidence that would definitively point to Barry as a suspect, at least none strong enough to justify an immediate arrest. A few neighbors did recall occasional arguments, though these were generally dismissed as typical couple disputes.
The 2-year-old inside their apartment was loudly crying, and that's what alerted this neighbor who declined to give us her name. She called 911.
Once you hear somebody child crying, you will go check, because the neighbors, we live in the same house.
So you went and you checked, but there was no adult answering the door? You just heard the baby behind the door?
Yeah.
She says she found the body.
The officers that came when I called 911 did what they had to do. I don't know about anything before that.
However, when detectives spoke with Tonie's family, they uncovered a different perspective. While the couple appeared happy to outsiders, their relationship had endured more than its share of turmoil. Tonie's mother recalled the early days of Tonie and Barry's relationship. She explained that Tonie had met him online, only to later discover that he had been following her activities since she was just 17. They eventually met in person when Tonie's daughter, Charlie, was only a few months old, and soon after, Tonie and Barry moved in together. But within just a month and a half, things took a dark turn, escalating to name-calling. By September 2017, Barry had even spit in Tonie's face, a deeply humiliating incident that Tonie tearfully confided to her mother, vowing never to go back to him. Yet, just a week later, she moved back in, unable to fully break free from the relationship. But things only got worse with the couple. She recounted one night, after an argument, Barry threw Tonie outside with no clothes on right after they had been intimate. Alone and vulnerable, Tonie called her mom, shocked and upset, telling her how he threw her outside naked at 2 a.m. for like 15 minutes. Even the neighbors, including the one who would later find her body, tried to intervene, shouting at Barry not to throw her out. Within 2 months of this incident, sometime in March 2017, after taking a break and dating other people, Tonie and Barry reconciled. Barry quickly proposed, and just 2 weeks later, they were married. It became clear that Tonie didn't tell her mother or any family members about their nuptials. Instead, her family only learned of her marriage through Facebook. It was also clear to detectives that things were moving too fast and that their relationship was far from stable. As time passed, Tonie's family grew increasingly worried about her relationship with Barry. They warned her of the potential dangers as his behavior often unsettled them, leaving them fearful he might eventually harm her. Despite their concerns, Tonie continued to make excuses for staying with him, convinced that Barry needed her support and that she could help him work through his issues. When detectives spoke with Tonie's sister, she didn't hold back her suspicions. It was him. It wasn't an accident. It was definitely him, she stated, leaving no doubt that the he she referred to was Barry Wells. More family members soon came forward, each adding pieces to the puzzle. As they shared their stories, a troubling pattern began to emerge. Ominous warning signs revealed that Tonie's life was far from the perfect image she had projected. As detectives delved further into the investigation, combing through their database, they uncovered a crucial piece of information. Tonie had an active order of protection against Barry, a revelation that cast him in a far more suspicious light. And Tonie's cousin Kat had a lot to say about how this came to be.
So they hit it off, they had good times, right? And things took a turn towards the end of the year. So they started dating in April 2016. And already by December 2016, there was name calling, there was spitting on her. All of the beginning signs that it was only going to escalate from there. They had gotten married in April of 2017. That was another red flag because none of the family knew that they were getting married. We all found out on Facebook and we were all super tight-knit. So that was another red flag that they would keep something like this from the family because she knew that clearly like her mom and my mom wouldn't agree with it and her family wouldn't agree with it. I wasn't really aware what was going on. I think they kept a lot of it secret because it was her business. So I didn't find out about the abuse until September 2017. And that's when I found out the extent to how bad the abuse was, where she said that she would sleep with a knife and she would not go to bed with doors closed, and she wouldn't shower with the shower curtains closed because she was always worried that he was going to attack her. So she did go to the police and file a police report explaining all of the abuse that she experienced, as well as an incident where he had choked her unconscious in her mother's basement. She survived, and it frightened her a lot. And so she went to the police, filed a police report. He was arrested, and he was let out on cash bail same day after admitting to choking her unconscious and leaving her in the basement.
Kat also revealed that during the 4 months they were back together after September 2017, Barry showed little compassion toward Tonie. Instead, he would frequently flaunt photos and videos of other women he had been with during their break, using them to undermine her confidence and chip away at her self-esteem. As Kat continued, she shared critical details of the 4 days leading up to Tonie's murder. December 23, 2017, family bingo night, 4 days before Tonie's murder. Before bingo night, Kat grew increasingly suspicious that Tonie had returned to Barry just 1 week after filing the protective order. Her doubts were fueled when she noticed football playing in the background of Tonie's Snapchat and Instagram stories, an odd detail, as Tonie had no interest in the sport. By the time bingo night came around, Tonie's family strongly suspected she had rekindled her relationship with Barry, but believed she was deliberately keeping it a secret from them. With a blend of emotion and vivid detail, Kat recounted the events of December 23rd. Tonie and her family had gathered for a festive bingo night that evening, just 4 days before her tragic death.
So I remember pulling up to her mom's house on December 23rd. I was like, all right, it's going to be a lit night. We're going to have game night. We already said we were going to play bingo. So I remember going into the house. We were super excited. And Tonie was like in a bad mood, like texting. And her mom's like, she's mad right now. I was like, wait, what's going on? Like, I thought we celebrating Christmas. Like, what's going on? So her mom's like, Tonie, you want to tell them what happened? So I'm like, sis, what's going on? Like, why are you upset? Like, what's happening? And she's like, well, some girl just DM'd me that Barry's been cheating on me with her. And so I was just confused. I'm like, why? First off, why would this girl decide to write you right around the holidays? And like, are you talking to him again? Like, what's the vibes? Like, were you guys talking again? Like, why would she randomly just hit you up on the 23rd? Like, oh, I'm messing with your husband. So Tonie said that, I believe a couple of days prior to that, Tonie had went to Barry's job because he lured her there with like, oh, I got a gift for Charlie or whatever. So Tonie said that she went to the job, and when she was there, this girl had approached her like, oh, are you Tonie? And she's like, yeah. And the girl shook her hand like, oh, hi. And Tonie said that she remembered like getting like a weird feeling about it. Like it was just a little weird, but she just ignored it, didn't say much about it. So it turns out on the 23rd, that's the same young lady that wrote her saying that basically she was messing with Barry. So Tonie was pissed off. Like her mood was just completely messed up after this. Cause obviously, you know, hearing that you're trying to rekindle something with your husband and knowing that he's cheating on you also with an underage girl. Cause supposedly the girl went to the program that he was a director for. So whatever. Tonie said that she brought it up to Barry. Barry was denying it. And so they were arguing. So I was like, girl, let's just have a good time. Like, don't even give that energy. It's Christmas time. Like, let's just have a good time. Let's just drink. We're going to have a good time. Let's just vibe out. And then you could just address that tomorrow. So I remember she was like, all right, F it. So she had a beautiful onesie on. Her face was all beat. She looked beautiful. I remember walking into the apartment. I was like, girl, you look good. She had her red lipstick on. She looked so good. So I was like, oh, I want to go get me a onesie. So I was like, all right, let's go to Forever 21 right there in Times Square. Let me go get me a onesie so we can have the little onesie vibe going on. And then I'll get us a bottle of Honey Jack Daniels, and we're going to have a good time. So that's what we did. Her and I went to Forever 21. I remember we took a taxi because it was raining. And I remember in the car, she just like, I just feel so humiliated. Like, I just feel so embarrassed because, I was giving him another chance. And just to hear that he's cheating on me is just like, why would you keep luring me and saying you want to fix the family? And then you're playing me, and then you're playing me for a younger girl. And you also brought me around as young girls. So I remember her just saying like, she just felt so embarrassed and just so ashamed. And she's like, I'm just over it at this point. So I was like, again, I'm sorry that happened. I just listened to her. I didn't judge her. I wasn't like, I told you he's like not good for you. I was like, listen, you know your worth. You tried, but maybe it's time for you to walk away. So I got my onesie. We went back. We got a bottle. We played bingo. We was having a good old time. It was really, really a really dope vibe. I know a lot of the videos did go viral on social media. We just had a really good time. We drank the bottle. We opened gifts. We played a bunch of different games. And so at the end of the night, my mom and my brother went home. And so her mom, me, Tonie, her brother, her sister, we were all in the house. And things got a little heated because, liquor was involved. And so I guess Tonie, I don't know if like Barry was texting her. So she was kind of like annoyed. And so her mom and her brother were basically like, this is why you can't go back to him. Like time and time again, you're giving him chance after chance. And he just keeps playing you. And like, you just have to walk away. And that wasn't what Tonie wanted to hear at the time. I think it was a lot of misplaced anger. I think with alcohol and just the emotions being high, she did end up getting into it with her mom and her brother just because, again, like they're trying to tell her the truth, but she wasn't trying to hear it at that moment. So things took a turn. There was a big fight, but she ended up leaving with me. I was like, let's just go to my mom's house because I was visiting for the holidays. I was in grad school. So I was like, let's just go to my mom's house till things cool out. Y'all all talk tomorrow. So the night of the 23rd, she ended up going to my mom's house. And so we fell asleep and we were like, we'll just revisit all of this in the morning.
In the aftermath, Tonie, seeking some space for solace, decided to spend the night at her cousin Kat's house. While the tension with her family remained unresolved, Tonie was trying to find her way through the turmoil of her emotions. It was a small respite in what was becoming an increasingly volatile situation. December 24, 2017, 3 days before Tonie's murder. The next day, Tonie confided in her aunt and cousin about everything that had been weighing on her mind.
So I remember December 24th, we woke up, and I remember that the mood was just very heavy. You could tell that Tonie was very much in her thoughts. So the majority of the day of the 24th, I remember me and Tonie just kind of hanging out in my mom's room. And that was the day that we spent the most time really talking in depth about everything. Tonie was just kind of reflecting on her relationship with Barry. And I remember my mom and I were just really trying to just get an understanding of where her head was at and what was going on in her relationship. And just really trying to get her to understand that we love you, we support you, but you need to know your worth. And what she basically explained to us was that she just felt the need to save Barry. She explained that Barry had explained the abuse that he witnessed growing up and that he said he was going to be going to therapy to face these demons and address the trauma that he was dealing with. And she just felt like, I want to save him, I want to help him, and I want him to be better, and I want to guide him on how to be better. And what we explained to her, and I remember what I explained to her, was that you can't change someone. That person has to want to change. Yes, you can encourage Barry to go get the help, but Barry has to take the steps to be a better man. And I remember telling her, you can't save someone at the expense of your own well-being. You can't save someone and pull them up from drowning while they push you down and you drown. And what I explained to her was well, I understand, of course, when we love someone, we want them to be okay. And we feel like being a ride or die means standing beside them and guiding whoever you love through their storms. But what I explained to her was you have a bigger obligation to yourself as a mom, as a woman, and to your daughter. Your daughter needs you. And it's not okay that he's putting you down and abusing you and humiliating you and making you feel like you're less than. And again, it was a very honest and very vulnerable place. And I remember her just kind of letting it all out and just letting us into her mind. And it just gave me a lot of insight because it's so easy for us to just say, walk away. Why are you I don't understand. Why are you not walking away from that person? But when you speak to someone that's going through it, you start to see it's a psychological battle. This person, their abuser, has messed them up mentally, has gaslighted them to make them feel as though like, you're giving up on me. You don't love me. If you walk away from me, you're supposed to be my wife, my ride or die, like my woman. How are you going to leave me when I'm down? And I felt like he was guilt tripping her for her trying to choose herself. And so again, I remember just the 24th, like we just spent the whole day just like in the house, just like in the bed, laying down, watching TV, talking, and just really trying to encourage her and like remind her, like, you have to know your worth and you could love someone and you could want to save them, but you don't have to save them. That's not your responsibility. That person has to save themselves.
December 25th, 2017, Christmas Day. 2 days before Tonie's murder. 2 days before her murder, Tonie took a brave step forward. She made the decision to leave Barry and move into a shelter far away from his control and influence.
That day is when she woke up and she decided, like, I want to go into a shelter. I want to go into a domestic violence shelter because she feared that, he knew where her mom lived. He knew where she worked and all her places that she could possibly hide. And she felt that, okay, a shelter where at least I could get away from him. He won't know where I am. So I made some phone calls. I called different shelters, see if any of them had any, vacancies, any spots available. I called different numbers, and eventually I was given the number to the Family Justice Center. And of course, it was closed because it was Christmas Day. So we had decided, okay, so tomorrow morning on the 26th, we'll go. We'll see from there. We're going to start this process to get you into a shelter. So she decided, we should take the time to go get my paperwork, get some clothing, just in case, there is a spot in the shelter. We have all our paperwork ready, and we also have, some clothes. So we went to Brooklyn to go get her stuff, and I guess she was texting Barry as it was happening, and she's like, hey, listen, just so you know, I'm going to Brooklyn with my aunt and my cousin. Just don't make a scene, just stay out of the way. I'm just gonna go get my stuff, and we're gonna be in and out. And that was that. So we went to Brooklyn, and as we driving there, I think that we all were kind of nervous going to the apartment. It was my first time going to her apartment in Brooklyn, and I remember it just being so cold and just so scary. So of course, like, my mom takes the role, and she's like, do you see his car parked anywhere? And she's like, no. Tonie's like, no, I don't see his car. So we walk and we park across the street. We go, she starts unlocking the door. So my mom's like, you know what? Let me go in first. My mom has like a pipe, like, let me go in first in case he tries to attack. I'm gonna go in first. So my mom goes in first, Tonie goes second, and then I'm in the back. And so I grab the shovel and she unlocks the door. My mom goes to the apartment first as we still in the hallway, and my mom checks the apartment and she's like, all right, like, he's not in here, we're clear. So me and Tonie go inside, and my mom stays by the door with the pipe in case he tries to come in. So it felt like it was a scene out of a movie, like as if a woman's trying to escape, and we don't know like how much time we have left. And so she, she's packing her stuff, and I'm trying to keep her calm. I'm like, you know what, Tonie, like, take your time, Tone, like, just find out what you need, get the clothes that you need, get, the baby's clothes, your clothes for work. You have, your jackets, you have your scarves, your sweatpants, your panties, bras, whatever. So we're packing all her stuff, and as she's getting it to me, I'm putting it in the bag, and, we're packing the bags. Sorry, so I could just tell that she was like nervous. So I'm like, okay, get your paperwork, make sure you have all the paperwork, and get anything that you need. So she grabs all her stuff. So as we're getting ready to leave, my mom's like, hurry up, let's go. So we get all her stuff. She's walking towards the car. And I remember my mom saying this, like, specifically, like, word for word. She's like, Tonie, you were lucky this time to get out alive. Next time, you're not going to be so lucky. And I remember brushed it off. So, we pack in the car, and as we pack in the car, we're still trying to make sure that, like, he doesn't just pop up anywhere. So I remember her just, like, looking kind of relieved, like, all right, we got through that. Like, we dropped her stuff off to her mom's house. And then we went to a neighbor's holiday party. She had a really good time. And I remember, like, at the end of the night, after we were lit off Taylorport, I remember her writing on her Instagram story, like, I'm finally happy. And I wrote her in her DM, even though we were like a room apart. And I was like, this is the way you deserve to feel all the time. Like, you deserve to feel happy all the time.
December 26, 2017. 1 day before Tonie's murder. On the day before her murder, Tonie's future seemed brighter than it had in a long time. She had secured a spot in a shelter in Queens and recounted her harrowing ordeal to the staff, who assured her that she would be safe under their care.
December 26th, I remember us waking up early because we had to go to the Family Justice Center It was kind of in and out. The lady, one of the workers, she told Tonie, oh, domestic violence, like shelters and all issues with domestic violence are done over the phone. It's really confidential. And so she gave her like a paper. She said, call this number. So we go to her mom's house, and she calls the number, and she does the intake over the phone. And I remember her like on the phone with the people from the shelter, and she's kind of explaining like, stuff that Barry has done to her, and the order of protection that she got, and how she had a kid. I'm thinking about a divorce, and I'm scared that he's gonna come after me once he finds out that I want a divorce. It's kind of like a 30-minute process. My mom happened to pick me up, and so on my way home, I remember Tonie texting me, and she's like, I got into a shelter, and they want me to come now. The guy from the shelter told me to take the train to the last stop, and I think it was like on the E train. But we told her, tell him like, we're driving you. So he told her get dropped off on I think 169th or 189th in Jamaica. So we turn back around and we go to pick her up. And I remember before we go to head to Queens, she goes, I want to pawn on my wedding ring. And we all were kind of shocked. We were like, oh, because I think she took so much pride in that wedding ring. Despite everything that happened, she took so much pride in that ring. So we take her, she gets her ring pawned, and she's like, I got money now. She seemed like she was in good spirits. She was happy. And so, we drove her and the baby to Queens. And I remember in the car, you could just tell she was a little nervous because I think like, it was a new journey for her. So we spent that time driving to Queens, just encouraging her and letting her know, like, you're going to be okay. Like, you're gonna be fine. She kept saying like, I got this. And so, we gave her her bag. So I remember the advocate like meeting her. He didn't even cross the street. He kind of stood on that side of the street, didn't make it too obvious. So, we gave her a hug, and we're like, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. So she's like, yeah, like I got it. And so yeah. So we drop her off, and she goes to the shelter. So about like 2 hours later, we texting her, like making sure that she's okay. And this is around probably like 7:30. She's like, yeah, like I'm okay. And so she sent me like some videos, and she's like recording the shelter. And she's like, look, like they gave me groceries, and they gave her like bed sheets and stuff like that. They gave her a crib for the baby. She said, like it's peaceful and it's quiet. And I remember texting her like, like, this is your way out, like you got it, like this is for you, this is for Charlie, like you can't mess this up, like. And she kept telling me like, I got this. At 9:39 we FaceTimed, and it was like really brief, ended in about like 3-4 minutes, and yeah, that was the last time that I was gonna speak to Tonie.
December 27th, 2017, the morning of Tonie's murder. On the morning of the sad incident, the atmosphere was tense at the apartment on Sterling Place in Crown Heights. As detailed by Tonie's cousin Kat, Barry likely lured Tonie back to the apartment one last time. Tonie, who had been at a shelter just the day before her tragic death, left early the next morning, assuring everyone she would be back. However, surveillance footage later revealed that she had gotten into Barry's car with baby Charlie.
And I woke up that morning. I remember waking up that morning and I was missing Tonie. I'm like, I miss her. Like I spent the last 4 days waking up to her. So I text her. Well, no, I DM'd her a video from an influencer on Instagram, and I sent it to Tonie, and it was about women having to fill their own cup before they try to fix someone else. So I remember like DMing it to her, and I didn't get a response. And so,
according to reports, Tonie and Barry started arguing around 8 a.m. right at the entrance of their home. Their argument was part of a larger, ongoing problem involving Tonie staying in a shelter and Barry being unfaithful. Tonie contacted the police, expressing concern for her safety and indicating that she was afraid of her husband, Barry Wells. According to reports, she was caught on the 911 call saying, "He's gonna kill me." This call prompted officers Lau and Jaber to be dispatched to Tonie's residence. However, upon arrival, the officers failed to exit their vehicle. According to Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, the officers cited it was too cold, so they remained in their vehicle and did not approach the apartment. Later that morning, after neighbors reported hearing a child crying, police returned to the scene. This time, they entered the home and discovered Tonie, deceased, at the bottom of a staircase. Unfortunately, the response from Officers Lau and Jaber fell far short of expectations. The duo was later suspended, as the NYPD launched an investigation into their handling of the 911 call.
But when an earlier 911 call came in around 8 Wednesday morning, the two initial responding officers may have dropped the ball. That's why they are suspended.
It's up to us to make sure that we fully investigate that.
Preliminary reports that I received that they did not exit their vehicle, and that's troubling.
As a father, I feel like I did fail.
But the victims' parents believe the NYPD also failed them. As we previously reported, 2 cops were suspended for not getting out of their car when called to the home. Prosecutors say the couple was arguing while their then 21-month-old daughter was locked out in the hallway. The Daily News reporting instead of being fired, officers Lau and Jaber were put on dismissal probation. Police tell us those officers are currently on active duty more than 3 years later.
These 2 officers, I don't know how they sleep at night.
You could have saved my daughter, man. Y'all could have got out that car and saved my daughter.
According to a neighbor, he had overheard Tonie and Barry arguing earlier that day about another woman. He didn't intervene, thinking it was just like all the other times they had fought. Then, suddenly, everything fell silent. The only sound left was 21-month-old baby Charlie crying after being locked out in the apartment. Concerned, the neighbor's wife went to check on the baby. A little while later, the neighbor's husband received a message urging him to check the basement, and that's when he discovered Tonie's lifeless body. Barry Wells didn't stick around after the incident. He fled the scene, but was later arrested by the police in New Rochelle. On December 27, 2017, the same day Tonie was found dead, detectives identified her husband, Barry Wells, as the primary suspect. He was apprehended that evening in New Rochelle, New York, with assistance from the New Rochelle Police Department. Initially, Barry Wells faced charges of aggravated criminal contempt and criminal contempt, pending the autopsy results. Following the autopsy, which confirmed that Tonie died from homicidal asphyxia, including compression of the neck, indicating she was strangled, the charges were upgraded to second-degree murder. The prosecutors shared that at the time of her death, Tonie had a protective order against Barry. The court decided to hold Barry without bail. He could face life in prison if found guilty of the most serious charge against him. After his arrest, Barry Wells, who was 29 years old, claimed he had attempted to self-harm, leading to his brief hospitalization. However, this claim was later found to be untrue, as stated by the chief of detectives, Robert Boyce, during a press conference. Boyce also mentioned that Barry spoke about the ongoing issues in their relationship, indicating that they had a turbulent and unstable living situation, which was often on and off. Detective Boyce explained that understanding the ongoing issues between Tonie and her husband was difficult, especially since Barry had been previously arrested in September in Manhattan for choking Tonie. At that time, Tonie was staying with her mother. There had been previous incidents of a similar magnitude, and police had been called to their home at least once before. Later, after his arrest on December 27th, Barry admitted to the police that he had killed his wife. However, when it came to the legal proceedings, his lawyers entered a plea of not guilty on his behalf. According to the court documents, Barry told the police that his wife had accidentally fallen down the stairs and was struggling to breathe. Despite knowing CPR, he chose not to help her. Instead, he checked her pulse, and once he realized she was no longer alive, he panicked and fled the scene.
Nah. Let's not forget, he had choked my daughter out 2 months before he killed her. It was premeditated. He waited for her in front of the domestic violence shelter. Right after he got out the car, he grabbed Charlie first. There was a Jewish man walking with his dog and his wife. And Tonie whispered to him, "I'm gonna get killed. He's gonna kill me. Call the cops." He actually tortured the shit out of my daughter. You know what I'm saying? Like, my daughter was black and blue. Doorknobs. Marks on the back of her back. Her ankles were black and blue because he killed her out in the inside. He left a pillow in the kitchen. And then he placed fucking body in the fucking basement, like he threw it and then walked away. And got in his car, drove off, took a bath at his friend's house. His mother said, go on the run. Y'all fucking seen pictures? He murdered her. What the fuck? What? I said it what? By he's killing my daughter. The girl upstairs is listening, and she took the stand. And she said it. I heard her gasping for air. And he was telling my daughter, I told you so. I told you so. I told you I was gonna do this. They found a whole fucking pillow in the kitchen. So obviously, my daughter's whole mouth was black and blue. You see his thumbprint. And they found another DNA. It could have been Charlie's. ACS will always come visit me while Tonie was alive, because Tonie got choked out and he left her for dead downstairs. Right in my basement. He waited for her in the elevator and took her downstairs.
Barry's trial began in January 2024, 7 long years after the December 2017 murder of his wife, Tonie. The delay was attributed to Barry changing attorneys multiple times, along with complications arising from the pandemic. When the trial started, the courtroom was filled with heavy emotions as Tonie's family came face to face with Barry. It was visibly difficult for them to look at him, the person responsible for their unimaginable loss. Throughout the Brooklyn Supreme Court trial, Barry, who had been hospitalized after his arrest, kept his head down, avoiding eye contact. After so many years, Tonie's family was forced to endure the pain of reliving her tragic death in court. They listened to the evidence presented against Barry and heard the details of the events leading up to that fateful day. The courtroom became a place of torment for them as they sat through the legal proceedings, waiting for justice to be served for Tonie. At an earlier moment during the trial, when Ellie first saw Barry, she didn't react angrily. Instead, she was overwhelmed with sadness and confusion, asking herself why it was her daughter who had to die. She shared in a radio interview that looking at him only made her feel sorrowful, not angry. She couldn't bring herself to be mad at him directly. Instead, her frustration and hurt were unintentionally directed at her own family members during an emotional outburst. Maybe, if they'd all been watchful and had taken quick actions, Tonie would still be alive. Ellie expressed confusion and frustration on the iAccess radio podcast about how Tonie ended up back at Barry's house, given the circumstances. She revealed that Barry was not only unfaithful, but involved with a very young girl from his workplace, a 17-year-old who had reached out to Tonie, claiming Barry had also choked her. This young girl had warned him that if he hurt her again, she would tell his wife. Barry reportedly threatened her life if she did so. Eventually, the girl's cousins confronted Barry, beating him up, adding to his troubles as he was already on the brink of losing both his job and his wife. This all happened right before Christmas, which Ellie believes pushed him over the edge. Ellie also shared a heartbreaking detail about how she tried to help her daughter. Despite her efforts, Tonie began to resent her because she was always trying to protect her. She recounted that around the time of the protective order, Barry confronted her in Ellie's back hallway, assaulted her, and left her unconscious in the basement. Ellie's superintendent found Tonie barely alive. In that incident, Barry was arrested on felony charges of second-degree strangulation. He allegedly dragged Tonie down a stairwell in a building on West 42nd Street in Manhattan, forced her into a closet, and placed his hands around her neck until she lost consciousness. Ellie added that he was supposedly a black belt in judo, indicating Barry had the skills to seriously harm someone. The family's pain and disbelief were palpable as they grappled with the sad events that unfolded. The court documents suggest that the conflict between Tonie and her husband Barry got worse due to her staying in a shelter and his infidelity. In interviews, Barry admitted he started seeing other women because Tonie had obtained a protective order against him. Michelle Ruiz, a 22-year-old neighbor who last saw Tonie 3 weeks prior, shared some sad news. She confirmed that Tonie was pregnant before, and police had seen a social media post from Tonie stating she was 8 months gone. Tonie's cousin, however, shared another sad detail. Something had happened even before the tragedy. She said that Tonie, who was 8 months pregnant, lost her baby following an argument at home. In a shocking revelation, it was confirmed that on the day of her death, Tonie was once again pregnant. This marked her fourth reported pregnancy in less than 6 months, a pattern that had raised concerns among those close to her. Although Tonie was carrying a child at the time of her murder, the law in New York only recognizes a fetus as a victim if the pregnancy has reached 24 weeks, a threshold she was likely under. On that tragic day, not only did Tonie lose her own life, but she also lost the life of her unborn baby, a devastating double loss that underscored the depth of the tragedy. The outcome of the trial left the family reeling. Barry was convicted of Tonie's murder, but the sentence he received was shockingly lenient. In February 2024, Barry faced a jury and was convicted of criminally negligent homicide. Initially, the prosecutors charged him with second-degree murder, aiming to hold him accountable at a higher level of responsibility for his wife's death. During his trial, however, the presiding judge permitted the jury to consider a lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide. The jury ultimately convicted Barry of this lesser charge. He was sentenced to 7 years, which he had already served while awaiting trial, leading to his immediate release. As the court session ended and Barry was led out in handcuffs, the tension reached its peak. Tonie's family couldn't contain their anger and shouted at him, overcome with grief and outrage. Everyone in Tonie's family reacted strongly, except for Tonie's mom. For Tonie's loved ones, this was an injustice that compounded their grief. How could the man responsible for taking her life walk free after such a short time behind bars? The sentence felt like a betrayal of the life Tonie had lived. The wounds they had tried to heal were ripped open once again as they faced the reality that Tonie's killer was now free while she was gone forever. This release reignited the anger and heartache that had consumed them after her death, leaving them with a sense of unresolved pain and a longing for the justice they felt was never truly served. On the day Tonie died, Ellie lost not only her beloved daughter and her unborn grandchild, but also full access to her granddaughter, Charlie. In the wake of Tonie's domestic violence case, Child Protective Services had already been involved, and they swiftly placed Charlie in foster care after Tonie's death. Since then, Ellie has been fighting tirelessly for full custody, determined to bring Charlie home and give her the stability and love she deserves. The heartbreak didn't end there. Just 18 months after Tonie's murder, Charlie's biological father, who had been largely absent from her life and had only seen her a few times, was also killed. Reports indicated that he was targeted in a fatal retaliation after robbing someone, with a hit placed on him following the incident. This loss added another layer to the tragedy surrounding Charlie's young life, leaving her without either of her parents. In addition to Ellie's ongoing custody fight, Charlie's paternal grandmother has also been involved, leading to a complex and emotional custody battle. Both grandmothers, desperate to bring Charlie home, have been entangled in legal struggles, each hoping to provide her with the family and stability she has lost. For Ellie, the drive to secure Charlie's future has become a way to honor Tonie's memory, refusing to give up on the last piece of her daughter she has left. Haunted by these events, Ellie shared how her granddaughter now watches her closely, telling her not to go to sleep as she tries to keep her grandmother's eyes open, afraid of losing another loved one. This ongoing trauma and the inadequate response from the police led Ellie to take legal action, filing court papers to sue the city, driven by a determination to seek justice for her daughter and protect her granddaughter.
I have good days, but I have more bad days. It's really been tough. That's all I can say. It's like, I don't know how I'm sitting here, and it's like, I'm trying to be strong for you guys so you can know what's going on, but it's not easy. It's not. And it's gotten really, really bad since she's been gone. It hasn't been good. Like I said, praise and faith just pulls me through the day. It's so much going on, you know? It's like so much intake that I have to take and absorb, and sometimes you just have to be quiet. It's not always good, guys. It's not. After you lose a child, and then like I said, you know, fighting for Charlie, right after I lose my child, it's like I never got to mourn my daughter. And this is what hit me the most. Like, there's more to it, like, it's been a year, but it hasn't been good. It hasn't been good. You see how much weight I lost? 26 pounds. Like, anybody can see that. Everybody in my inbox like, you're so skinny. Like, oh, she has cancer. What's wrong with Ellie? No, I'm depressed. I lost a freaking child. And on top of that, they're taking my granddaughter away from me. It's like, how am I supposed to go in the kitchen and eat?
Ellie was deeply upset about the police negligence, recalling a horrifying incident from 6 months earlier when Barry had choked Tonie. Despite this, he was bailed out for $5,000 by the district attorney. After Tonie's murder, the district attorney expressed regret to Ellie, mentioning that the officers had stayed in their car because it was too cold to get out. Ellie recounted heartbreakingly that he murdered her daughter and left her granddaughter on top of her. Her granddaughter, not yet 2 years old, witnessed the whole thing, later telling her grandmother in simple words that her daddy put mommy to sleep, even mimicking the action. Following Tonie's tragic death, her family has been determined to create lasting change by advocating for legislation that would impose harsher penalties on repeat domestic violence offenders. They are working to pass a law in her name, aiming to protect future victims by ensuring that abusers with histories of violence face stricter consequences. Additionally, her family launched the I Am Tonie Project, a nonprofit initiative dedicated to raising awareness about domestic violence, supporting survivors, and pushing for systemic reforms. Through this project, Tonie's family hopes to honor her memory and create a safer world for those affected by abuse. What do you think about this tragic case? Tonie's relationship with Barry lasted just over a year, but it was marred by violence and control, ultimately ending in tragedy. Within 5 months of their marriage, Tonie was compelled to seek a protective order against Barry. Although they separated in September 2017, Tonie returned to him a week later, raising concerns among her family. According to Tonie's mother, during that same September, Barry had choked Tonie and left her for dead. He also choked another young woman who had threatened to tell Tonie about their affair. Even more shocking, Tonie's mother revealed that when Tonie first met Barry, he was on parole for choking another woman. These chilling patterns of violence painted a disturbing picture of Barry's escalating behavior. The heartbreaking loss of Tonie Wells forces us to confront the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions and dangerous relationships. Barry Wells's actions weren't born out of a single moment, but instead from a pattern of control and possessiveness. Tonie experienced repeated pregnancies, reportedly 4 times within a span of less than 6 months. According to her mother, she was pregnant in September, suffered a miscarriage, and by November was pregnant again. This cycle of pregnancies became another tool of control for Barry, as each pregnancy further tied her to him, limiting her independence and increasing her vulnerability. In this way, Barry's influence extended beyond physical and emotional control. It reached into her personal agency, tying her to him in ways that made it increasingly difficult to leave or seek freedom. Given that the 2 initial officers reportedly stayed in their vehicle instead of checking on Tonie when first dispatched, leading to potential delays in response. What are your thoughts on their suspension and quick return to duty just 3 years later? Do you feel this punishment was adequate, or should further actions have been taken? Though Barry was sentenced, his release after only 7 years leaves us grappling with deeper questions about justice and the lingering scars left behind. Can any sentence truly account for the life he took and the future Tonie never got to experience? Or does it simply close a chapter while leaving behind pain that may never fully heal? Let's continue the conversation down in the comments section below. As always, I'll meet you there. In these stories, there are no perfect victims, just imperfect individuals navigating different roles in life. Tonie was more than a wife to Barry. She was a loving daughter, sister, aunt, niece, cousin, mother, and friend to many who now mourn her loss. She will forever remain in the hearts of those who cherished and loved her, not because she was perfect, but because she was perfectly wonderful in their eyes. This is why I extend my gratitude to the victims for being beacons of love and light, despite any flaws that may emerge from their stories. So, thank you, Tonie, for being an example of love and light. May you rest in eternal peace.